Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video and leaving such heartfelt comments. Wishing everyone lots of health and peace. Thank you for sending such wonderful words of encouragement. Now let's start the video. Early in the morning, as the first light of dawn glimmered over the distant hills, Diep woke up early. She felt the tranquility of the fresh air surrounding the small house that James had helped her find. Though modest, the house felt like a true sanctuary, a place that brought her peace and safety. Diep put on her old clothes, her bare feet touching the ground as she stepped outside and walked up the hill. She cut some branches, a laborious task, but she couldn't stop. The cassava plants along the road had already been dug up yesterday, and today she decided to take them to the market to earn some extra money. Diep worked diligently, her hands swiftly turning the soil, digging up cassava roots and carrying them up the hill. Her body was exhausted, but there was a small glimmer of hope in her heart. She knew that this work would help her not only take care of herself but also support James during his tough times. Each strike of the hoe felt like an act of liberation from past pain. I will not surrender to fate. I won't let anything or anyone make me step back, Diep thought to herself. When the work was done, Diep sat down on a large stone in the garden, sweat beading on her forehead. She looked at the freshly harvested cassava, feeling proud that she could take care of herself. However, her gaze betrayed some worry about the future. She recalled the difficult days when she had to live in humiliation and pain. But now she could stand up and continue living with hope. Diep told herself she had to be even stronger, as life was not easy. But deep down, she knew that no matter how hard it was, she could always start over. She wouldn't let the past weigh down her future. This was her only chance to live a free life and build her own future. Despite facing legal issues and mounting debts, James decided to continue with his work, visiting the workers on his project. He drove deep into the forest where the workers were laboring hard. The roads were difficult to navigate, but James persevered, thinking about everything he had endured so far. Upon arriving, he met with the workers, who were working tirelessly under the scorching summer heat. He spoke with them about the progress of the work, encouraging them to keep going despite the company's troubles. "We still have a chance. Our project can change everything. I won't let you down," James said. His words were firm, but inside he felt a heavy, invisible burden pressing down on him. The company was losing its financial resources, debts were piling up, and a series of lawsuits were coming in his direction. During a meeting with a group of workers, James still tried to appear strong, but there were moments when he couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes. Despite this, he knew he couldn't stop. He had to maintain the trust of those around him, to prove that he could solve all the problems, no matter how large they were. The fatigue was undeniable, but James knew he couldn't let these difficulties defeat him. He had to continue facing the challenges, not just for himself but for everyone who had placed their trust in him. Sometimes, the belief of others was the only strength that kept him going through the storm. Each conversation with the workers was not just about encouragement but also a reminder to himself to be even stronger. James knew he couldn't continue living with constant worry and stress. He would find a way to overcome it all, even if it meant facing the threat of total collapse. Diep gathered the cassava she had dug up and walked down the narrow dirt road, each step marking a difficult day. The sun had risen high, and the scorching heat made sweat drip down her forehead. Yet Diep didn't feel tired. She knew today was an important day. She needed to sell the cassava to earn some extra money for her life. When she reached the market, she set the cassava out for sale. Although she knew the money would not be much, it was the result of an entire day's hard work. Diep carefully selected each piece of cassava, arranging them neatly on a small mat. Just then James passed by. He saw Diep busy selling cassava and stopped his car. He watched her for a moment, filled with a strange sense of regret. But not letting emotions cloud his judgment, he got out of the car and walked toward her. Diep didn't recognize him immediately, but when she saw him, a soft smile appeared on her weary face. "Are you looking for something?" Diep asked curiously, and James only smiled and replied, "I want to help you." Before Diep could react, James borrowed a worker's uniform and changed into it. He rolled up his sleeves and started cleaning the market area. The workers around him were surprised to see this man doing such tasks. Afterward, James walked over to Diep's stall and bought all the cassava she had on display. Diep stood there, shocked and touched. "Thank you," she said, her eyes filled with gratitude. James smiled, gently patted her shoulder and said, "Don't thank me, I just want to help you." It was a simple gesture but one full of meaning. In Diep's heart, she felt a warm light rising, knowing that she wasn't alone in this life anymore. While James was helping Diep far away, her mother-in-law could no longer bear the situation. She couldn't accept that Diep had left without settling the debt. Filled with anger and frustration, she decided to go to Diep's house to demand the repayment of the 1 billion VND debt her son claimed Diep was responsible for. She stormed into Diep's house, demanding her presence immediately, with no excuses allowed. Diep's father, although knowing how difficult things were for his daughter, had no choice but to comply with the mother-in-law's demands. He couldn't refuse, as doing so would only create more trouble for the family. Diep's mother-in-law was furious and ordered him to go and find Diep. As Diep was on her way back to the forest, her father suddenly appeared. He grabbed her and pulled her back without a word, forcing her with no chance to resist. When they returned home, the mother-in-law immediately began yelling at Diep mercilessly. She didn't give Diep any chance to explain herself, only throwing harsh and cruel words at her. Diep lowered her head, too scared to look up, and tears streamed down her face. She didn't know what to do to end this suffering. Helplessness filled her heart, but all she could do was remain silent and endure. At home, Diep continued to be berated by her mother-in-law, causing her mind to spiral into chaos. She wasn't given any chance to prove herself. Each word from her mother-in-law felt like a knife cutting through her heart, making her unable to bear it. From start to finish, Diep could only cry, her heart aching as if sinking into darkness. She realized that everything she had to endure was the punishment for her own decisions. After a night of heavy drinking, Diep's ex-husband sank deeper into despair. He lost control of himself, and the lonely days since Diep left him only made him fall further into the darkness. He couldn't find a way out. Alcohol was his only companion. That day he wandered down a deserted road, his steps unsteady, his eyes glazed over from the alcohol. His mind was consumed with memories of Diep, her presence, and the happy days that were now shattered beyond repair. In his drunken stupor, he mistook a man passing by for Diep. He rushed toward him, but the man, enraged by the disturbance, angrily struck him down, leaving him unconscious on the road. People walked by, glancing at him but not stopping to help. His sense of hopelessness grew as he lay there, abandoned in the empty street, ignored by everyone. He lay motionless, enduring the sharp pain coursing through his body. The feeling of being useless and unable to control himself made him feel like a complete failure in all aspects of his life. It wasn't until some time later that his mother arrived, rushing to help him up. Seeing her son in such a pitiful state, she felt a deep pain in her heart. She looked at him with eyes filled with sorrow but also with worry about his future. Could he change? Could she help him find Diep and salvage what little was left of their family? She didn't know what to do, and she wasn't sure if there was any hope left for the family when everything seemed to have fallen apart. She comforted him, her tears silently falling, her mind full of thoughts and concerns. Could her promises change the current situation? Or were they just meaningless words in a life filled with hardship? She wondered if Diep would ever return, if there was any hope left for a happy life like before. These questions repeated in her mind, but there was no answer to be found. With a heavy heart, James decided to visit Diep again in the evening. He brought some food he had prepared earlier, hoping they could share a simple meal together. His heart felt burdened when he thought of the difficulties Diep was facing. He knew her life wasn't easy, and still, he wanted to be someone she could rely on during her hardships. When he arrived near her house, he didn't expect that Diep would mistake him for a thief. She unexpectedly hit him on the shoulder as he approached. He had to steady himself and explain that he was not a bad person, only wanting to help her. After a moment of clarification, Diep realized who he was and quickly opened the door to invite him in. They sat down to eat together, chatting and sharing stories of the ups and downs of life. James told Diep about the struggles he was facing at work and the legal battles he was caught up in. His voice couldn't hide the tension and worry he felt. Diep listened attentively, her eyes fixed on him, sensing the exhaustion etched on his face. She asked about his difficult days, and James shared part of his heart with her. The mistakes he made in business and the emotional losses that led to the challenges he now faced. When the meal ended, James had to leave because of urgent work. Diep felt sadness creep in as he got ready to go, and she couldn't help but feel an emptiness as she watched him leave. She knew that every time James left, she would have to face the loneliness that followed. But despite that, Diep still felt the warmth James had brought into her life. In those brief moments together, she felt less alone than ever before. However, as soon as he left, the loneliness crept back in, like a cold wind seeping into her soul. Diep sat alone in the dark of the night, the light from the stove reflecting on her face, but unable to drive away the deep sorrow that filled her heart. She stood up and stepped outside, standing alone in the dark. The faint light of the moon illuminated the empty road as she leaned against a wooden post in the yard, gazing up at the star-filled sky. The coldness enveloped her, but inside, there seemed to be a small flame burning, weak but warm. She wondered if she could continue to live strong, without needing anyone else by her side. Could love really heal the wounds of her past? She knew she couldn't live forever in memories, but the fear of the challenges ahead still made her uneasy. Could she overcome everything when she had to face life alone?